Okay, let's talk about an example here to finish up the chapter. This will be our last one. And what we're going to do is make a simple MP3 player. It's probably the simplest MP3 player on the planet because it only plays one song. It doesn't rewind, it doesn't pause, just one song, that's it. We're going to start with a display window that has some image in it. It'll just sit there forever, waiting for us. And then eventually, when the mouse pointer is placed over the display window and the user clicks on the mouse, then when that happens, then click, all of a sudden the music starts playing. So as soon as we click that, we should see the image change and then music should start playing. Okay? That's the general idea of the application. Click the picture and it starts playing. Let's see how we might do that. Alright, now for this application, there's basically 4 methods that are all built-in methods that we have to deal with. We have to deal with what happens when the application starts, so it's setup method. We have to deal with what happens when the display window is refreshed in the draw method. Obviously, we have to deal with what happens when the mouse is clicked in the mouse clicked method. And then finally, we have a stop method, which we'll use to shut down the audio assets and make the application put away its toys nicely. Okay? So, let's talk about each of these in turn. We'll expand them all. Alright? So setup, there's several tasks that we need to do in there. Some of them are familiar. One of them is we need to size our window. Okay, so that will maybe be the first thing that we do. And we'll have to size that window in order to be, or make it the same size as the images that we're going to use. That way there's no leftover image part that we can't see and no more or none of the background showing through. Then we also need to do some sound related stuff. So we talked about that in previous videos, but in order to do that we need to create the loader, the minim object. It's going to be used to load the sounds, or the song in this case. And then we need to load our song based on that loader. Okay, so this is a minim object, creating that. This is creating the audio player object using the minim object. And then after that, what we'll do is we'll load our first image. Okay? So that will be the image that represents no sound playing, no song at all. Alright? So all of those things, sizing the window is separate. These two are related, obviously, and the loading of the image is separate. So the order could be a little bit different, but that seems to make sense, so we'll go with that. The draw method, super simple, because all we're going to do is draw the image, whatever that image may be. So one step. What we'll do is we'll have one variable, I don't know, I'm going to call it IMG or something like that, and we'll let that variable name be associated with our first image, and then we're going to draw that. And then what we'll do when we have a mouse clicked event is 2 things. The first thing is we're going to load our second image. Okay, so what that'll do is it'll take another picture and make that image reference variable point to it instead. That way the next time the draw method happens, new picture is drawn. Okay? And then after that, we'll play our song. Which is really the whole point of the exercise in the first place, is to play the song. Okay? The last piece then is our stop. And what we're going to do there is we're going to close the audio player, and then stop the minim object, and then any other shutdown stuff that needs to be done. Okay, so we'll close our player, stop the minim object, and then other stuff, whatever else processing needs to do in order to make that happen. Okay? So there are some sketches of the algorithms for all of those methods. You can look in the book for better detail and clearly better handwriting. Before we move on to the implementation, let's make sure that we understand the idea of this reference variable. Okay? All right, now, for the loading of images, let's just make sure we understand how this works before we go on to look at the actual implementation on the computer. Okay? So this picture represents two things. First of all, this box, that's the program that we're writing. Okay? And then this over here, this thing that looks like a barrel, that represents the disk drive of your computer. It's kind of a normal symbol to use disk drives as some sort of cylindrical structure. Okay? So out on that drive someplace, we've got two pictures, at least, and those pictures are the ones that we're going to use in our particular project. They've already been added to the project and everything. That is, we've dragged them onto the IDE, but they don't exist in the program until we load them with a load image. Okay? So during setup, we'll load this image. Okay, so now that is the one in memory. All right? And so when the program's running and waiting for us to click, that's the image that's drawn. Because this is the variable that's referred to in the draw method. Okay? But when the user clicks on the mouse key at some point, or mouse button rather, then we're going to load a different image using the same reference variable. So that means that this one essentially gets replaced. It goes away. It's not in memory anymore. And the one that is in memory is the one of our person singing. Okay? That happens when the mouse clicked event takes over. That is when the user clicks the mouse and that method goes. And then the next time draw happens, image points to this picture, and so that's the one that's displayed. Okay? So this one variable then refers to one picture to start with, but a second picture once we click on the mouse. Okay? Great. Let's check out implementation. All right, let's go ahead and talk about the implementation for our MP3 player here. We've done the design. We know that we have 4 methods that we need to work on. And so what I've done is I've already written the skeletons of the 4 methods and their comments. So I've got my setup, draw, and mouse clicked, and stop methods are already just implemented in terms of their bare bones. Now what we have to do is fill in their guts. Okay? We know that this particular application uses audio, and so what we're going to need to do is add the audio libraries to the sketch. Okay, so if we go to the sketch menu and do import library and minim, that will add some import statements up at the top that allow us to use the minim library, which lets us do sounds and music. Now, if you watch really carefully, these imports are different from the imports that are shown in the text, and that's because we're working with a slightly different version of the minim libraries in processing. But don't worry, it still works the same. Okay? The other thing that we're going to need is the media that we plan to use. So over here on the desktop, I have 3 items. I have my MP3 song. I have 2 images. Okay, and I'm going to drag all 3 of those onto the IDE at once. Here, and now it says that 3 files were added to the sketch. So that means those are ready to go. And now we can go ahead and start creating our program. Okay, I'll leave the header comments off for now. You can see those in the textbook and how they would be written. So what we need first is we need our class variables. They're going to represent the things that we're going to deal with in multiple methods in the program. So we have to have a minim object. We have to have a audio player object. And we have to have a p-image object that we're going to use for our images. Okay? So minim and audio player, those are both objects. It's important to know where your keys are on the keyboard that allow us to play sounds. Minim object, we only need one of those. Okay? And then the object to hold the song is called the audio player, and we need one of those for every song or sound that we're going to use. And then we have our p-image object, and that's the object to hold the background image, regardless of what that image is. It may be the first image or the second image, depending on where in the program we are. Okay, so now let's look at setup. There was a series of tasks in there according to our design. We needed to size the window, and I happen to know that my images are 300 by 300, so we'll make the window the same size. And then we have to load our song up. We do that by first creating a minim object. And that's going to be what we use to load files that are audio files. So loader equals new minim this. And this keyword, don't worry about right now. That's just magic as far as you're concerned. But notice that we're using our new keyword and the minim constructor to create a minim object that we store in the loader reference variable. Okay? And then we use the object to load the MP3 file that we want to play. Okay, so player equals loader.load file, and now we have to put in exactly the name of the file that we're going to be looking at, or audio file that we're going to be playing rather. And so I've called that funsong.mp3, and you would have that adapted to whatever you needed it to be, okay? Whatever the title of your song is, the name of the file. And lastly, we have to load the first image, and we do that like we've done before with a load image method call, and again we need to provide the name of the file exactly. Alright, there is our setup method. So let's go ahead and let's run this just to see what happens. Get that out of the way. Okay, so the program runs, displays a window. There's some stuff down here for minim, but we don't need to worry about that, generally speaking. That means it doesn't know the name information inside the MP3 doesn't match, but that's okay. Alright, so we have a running program at this point. Remember, we want to save and compile often so that we don't have the big bang effect going on where we have a whole bunch of errors at once. Alright, now in the draw method, that was super simple. All we have to do is draw the background image. Okay, and so we're going to do that like this. Draw the image that we have stored in the img reference variable at the coordinate 0, 0, which is the upper left corner of the screen. So let's see how that works this time. And there we go. That's our first image is shown on the background. Very good. Okay. In mouse clicked, then what we need to do is we need to do two things. We need to load a new image. So I'm going to use the same variable, but I'm just going to replace what it points to. Okay, so now as soon as I click the mouse, the new image will show up in the screen instead of the previous image, and then I'm going to start the song playing. Alright, so let's try it one more time. There's our first image, there's our second image, and some music starts. Okay, now let's go ahead and finish our stop method. What we have to do in there is we have to close the audio player, stop the loader. Those are basically just nice to do things so that we put away our toys correctly. And then we need to do the rest of the things that processing normally does when it shuts down. It usually happens automatically, but we'll make it happen this time by calling the super method, or super object, its stop method. Okay? So let's go ahead and try that one more time. There's the music. Click on it. There's the sound. If I turn that down a little bit, now hopefully, we still get a little artifact when the application shuts down, but that's not unusual for processing the way it deals with MP3 files. In any case, this is how we would code up our MP3 example. 4 methods, few lines in each method, pretty simple. Alright, well next up we're going to turn to Chapter 4 and start to learn how to make decisions.